ஸ்ரீ கிருஷ் பிக்சர்ஸ் சார்பாக கே சாம்பசிவம் தயாரிப்பில் ரமேஷ் ஜி இயக்கத்தில் அடவி பிப்ரவரி 7 முதல்.
You go to a movie, you come out of the theatre, and then there is either a story that catches your attention or a scene which captures your imagination. Or if nothing, there is a fight scene in which predictably the hero wins. The length of 160 minutes, what is the message that she had to convey to the people? What was she trying to say? I think it's unfortunate that after 160 minutes, there was no narrative in the budget. Which is why the budget as a topic has disappeared from the front pages of newspapers for the second day. It has also disappeared from television channels. It's like a movie which bombed after the first show. It's unfortunate that so many heads come together, they put their heads together and write a marathon speech, and yet the people are left in the dark about what is it that the government wanted to say. Let me begin with the state of the economy. What is the state of the economy? Now we know that for 6 quarters for which figures are available, growth has declined, quarter after quarter after quarter. It hasn't happened in recent years. Whether the 7th quarter will also show a decline or will flatten out, I cannot say. But 6 quarters of decline should alarm us. At the end of every quarter, the government said, the turnaround will happen in the next quarter. It's like the astrologer saying your fortunes will turn at the next study page. But it hasn't happened. 6-quarter decline is an alarming trend. Secondly, the finances are under pressure. You did not require any more evidence than when after Mr. Somanathan moved as Secretary Expenditure, the first order that he signed was, in the last quarter of this financial year, unlike the norm of capping the expenditure at 33%, the expenditure was capped at 25%. Many of you may have noticed it, some may not have noticed it. Traditionally, the last quarter's expenditure is capped at 33%, but he capped it at 25% because simply there was no money. And when I tell you the numbers, you will find that he was absolutely right. Inflation, if you take CPI inflation, it has crossed 7% in December. If you take food inflation, it has crossed 10%. In any view of the matter, the economy was in distress. It therefore required a very radical approach. It required radical surgery. The place to begin is for the doctor to acknowledge that the patient is very ill. Unless the diagnosis is correct, unless the doctor comes to terms with the truth and says, this is the state of the patient, how can the doctor prescribe the correct course of treatment? On the one hand, there is this larger picture that I painted. Growth is declining, inflation is high, the finances are greatly stressed, and none of the engines of growth seem to be firing. And if you drill into the numbers and look at sectoral numbers, the situation is even more alarming. In the period April-November, and that is all we've got figures for, April-November, mining declined by 0.1%. Coal declined by -5.3%. Gas declined by -3.1%. Refining declined by -1.1%. The IIP grew by 0.6%. Imports have declined for 8 months in a row. Exports have declined by 5 months in a row. And if you drill further into the numbers, you will find that in exports, in every sector there is a decline. Leather, handicrafts, agricultural products, cotton and sugar, there's a decline. Therefore, the finance minister should have sat back and asked herself and asked her team, if this is the state of affairs, give me the economic reasons, the economic explanation for this. See, these are numbers which you and I understand, but you and I are not required to understand the economic explanation for that. There is a theoretical and economic explanation for anything that's happening. And if you sat back and spoke to the experts, the economists, they would have told you very clearly there are two major economic explanations for the state of the economy. The first is the Indian economy is demand constrained. Now that might appear to be a high sounding word, but what it means is people are not buying things, that's all. They don't have the money to buy, or they don't have the inclination to buy. For whatever reason, people are not buying. It's a demand-constrained economy. Someone introduced me to a original equipment manufacturer of automobile parts. The auto industry has put out, Siam has put out, 2 lakh jobs have been lost, 296 auto workshops have been closed in the last year. That's only for the automobile industry. It is demand constraint. People are not buying. The second economic explanation is that the economy is investment starved. Investment is not taking place. These are the two major explanations for the state of the economy. There are other explanations, but I won't go into all of them. On the one hand, people are not buying. On the other hand, nobody is willing to invest in India, both domestic investors as well as foreign investors. And therefore, the natural reaction should be, all right, what shall we do to make people buy? And what shall we do to make people invest? It's a pretty logical argument. Economics is largely mathematics. If these are the conclusions, that the Indian economy is demand constrained and the Indian economy is investment starved, the right responses, what can I do to stimulate demand and what can I do to promote investment. Now all of you are businessmen, big, small. Now tell me, what has this budget done to stimulate demand? In fact, I will give you numbers which show the demand will be further constrained. The best way to stimulate demand, in fact, the most logical way, the most natural way to stimulate demand is to put more money in the hands of people. Just make sure people have more money. And who are these people? The people who need more money are not people who already have money. If you already are a rich man who is spending and who is saving a lot, there's no point giving you more money because you already have the money and you are spending as much as you want to spend. Which is why we said when they gave away 1,45,000 crore as corporate tax cut to industry, of course 150, 200 people were very happy, but that is not going to stimulate demand. The way to stimulate demand is to put money in the hands of crores of people. So that the guy will buy toothpaste, he will buy shoes, he will buy clothes, he will buy toys, he will buy food, he will buy eggs, he will buy chicken. It is mass consumption that will stimulate demand, not elitist consumption of the top 100 people or top 500 people. So the first thing that the finance minister should have done, the government should have done is make sure that money is put in the hands of a large number of people, not a small base, a very large number of people. Then we come to investment start. Now I know nobody's investing. Why are you not investing? You're not investing, one hand is still nobody's buying what you're producing. If inventory is piling up, obviously you won't invest. But the other reason why you're not investing is the capacity utilization in India of all industries is 49%. If on average 50% of capacity is idle, why would you invest money? Suppose you have a spinning mill of say 50,000 spindles and 25,000 spindles are idle, why would we buy more ring frames? What will you do with those ring frames? You have to ensure that the idle capacity is first utilized. So nobody is likely to invest when capacity utilization is very, very low. Another way to look at the capacity utilization is look at the capacity of power that is drawn. In terms of installed capacity, thermal power, only 50% is produced. That more or less mirrors the capacity utilization constraint. Half of India's capacity, in a broad sense, is idle. And surely nobody is a fool to invest more money when his current capacity is idle. Therefore, the two are related. Unless demand is stimulated, people start buying. And then capacity will be utilized, people will produce more, inventories will be liquidated, then people will say, maybe this is the time to invest. The lag will take about 2 years. But unless you start today, you will not see the result in 2 years. Which is why we've been saying, since the middle of 2018, start action now. These are not instant solutions. You announce something today and tomorrow things will happen. 2009 was a wasted year. I have a name for every year. 2016-17 was the year of demonetization. 2017-18 was a year of the flawed GST. 2019-20 was a wasted year. Now we're sincerely hoping that 2019-20, the government will wake up from its slumber and take action. Nothing very novel, something which everybody from Dr. Raghuram Rajan to Dr. Arvind Subramanian to Dr. Arvind Panagriya, everyone has been recommending. This is a demand-constrained economy. Make sure that demand for goods and services pick up and ensure that people buy more goods and services. The finance minister did not have to go too far. All that she had to do was to read the economic survey. I concede that there is always a gap between what the CEA says in his economic survey and what the finance minister does in the budget, which is why CEAs have never become finance ministers. There is always a gap. But a finance minister is obliged to read the economic survey. And the finance minister is obliged to share the near final draft of her speech with the chief economic advisor. In this case, I'm absolutely sure that the finance minister did not read the economic survey, nor did she take the CEA into confidence and share her speech with the chief economic advisor. The result is we have a complete mismatch between what the economic survey says and what the budget says. The economic survey has both good and bad parts. The good part is when it says boldly, government intervention in markets hurts the economy rather than helps the economy. That's a bold statement for someone to make. Very few government servants will make that statement. But a chief economic advisor is not exactly, in that sense, a government servant. He's made that statement, and I compliment him for that. Government intervention hurts the economy rather than helps the economy. And he has recommended how we should deal with the Essential Commodities Act, the Drug Prices Control Order. You don't have to accept all his recommendations, but you'll have to accept some recommendation or other. How can you read 2 volumes of an economic survey and say, I find nothing useful here? Then why is he sitting there? If there's nothing useful in those 700 pages, he's a useless guy. Get rid of him in the first place. The bad part of the economic survey is this great Thalaimurai. I'll deal with that if I have time at the end. It's the humorous part of the economic survey. Intended to be serious, but it turns out to be very humorous. Now, we now move to management of the economy so far. If this is the state of the economy, whose hands are on the steering wheel of the economy? Now, obviously, there is the finance minister, at whose table the buck stops. But we all know that there is a prime minister, and without the prime minister's nod, not a word can be said in parliament. So every word that the finance minister has said has the approval of the prime minister. Let's look at how the economy has been managed so far. On every target that they set for themselves at the beginning of 2019-20, the government has failed. On fiscal deficit, they set a target of 3.3. They've ended up with 3.8 plus a 0.7% of off-budget borrowing by the Food Corporation of India and 1 or 2 other public sector concerns. So 3.3 has really become 4.5. On the GDP, they assumed a nominal GDP growth of 12%. They've ended up with 8.5. On revenue deficit, they targeted 2.3%. They ended up with 2.4. On net tax revenue, they hope to collect 16,49,582 crore. They claim that by the end of March they will collect 15,24,587 crore, which is a shortfall of about 1,25,000 crore. But that's not what the market believes. The buzz in the market and the buzz in CBDT, CBIC is we will fall short, not by 1,25,000 crore, we will fall short by nearly 2 to 2.5 lakh crore. On total expenditure, government hoped to spend 27,86,349 crore, but they will spend only 20,58,552 crore. 26 lakhs 98,552 crore. About another 1 lakh crore less. So what they are saying is, the story that is being put out is, we're going to collect about 1,25,000 crore less, and we're going to spend about 1 lakh crore less. But that's not correct. Kindly wait until the final accounts are out and about in the month of May or June, and you will find that these numbers are wrong. They were wrong last year, and they will be wrong for the current year also. So while the patient is suffering from a very serious illness, unfortunately the doctor doesn't seem very competent either. So we have today a very ill patient and a rather incompetent doctor. And if you have an ill patient and a rather incompetent doctor, it's not difficult to predict what the phase of the patient will be. And I'm therefore very reluctantly predicting that we will go through a very difficult time in 2020-21, for the reason that the state of the economy is extremely critical and the competence of the doctors is extremely doubtful. Now we look at behavior. You and I can't do anything about the doctors for another 4 years and 3 months. We have to live with this doctor. I accept that. I accept that. But look at the behavior of the doctor. Some doctors change their behavior. I remember Mr. Narasimha in 1991 changed his behavior. He was an old school, dyed-in-the-wool socialist. But he suddenly found himself catapulted to the office of Prime Minister and he had retired to Hyderabad. He had even packed his library. He was suddenly called back from retirement and said, "You're Prime Minister." And he quickly changed gears in 15 days. In exactly 15 days he changed gears. The party was furious with him. The old guard in the party, people who had served Mrs. Indira Gandhi, were furious with him in the first cabinet meeting and refused to pass his industrial policy resolution. He was very upset. And one day, there was a conversation, he and I were chatting, and he said, "Why are these people saying that I had shifted my ground? I have not shifted my ground. I am standing where I am. The ground under me is moved. He is absolutely right. The world had moved to a more liberal, laissez-faire, capitalist economy. He is standing where he is, but the world has moved, and therefore I have to accept what is happening. And that is how the first budget of Dr. Manmohan Singh was presented. The industrial policy resolution was passed in the morning, and the budget was passed in the afternoon. There's a story about the industrial policy resolution also. When we brought a draft of industrial policy resolution to the cabinet would not approve it. Many of them are no more, but Mr. Arjun Singh, Mr. Fotadar, and many others said this is a departure from Nehruvian and Indira Gandhi policy. We can't accept it. So he called Dr. Manmohan Singh and me and said, listen, we take back this resolution and bring it back in a manner that our friends will accept it. I can't get through the cabinet like this. So Dr. Singh said, you take it back to your ministry and see what can be done. So Mr. Verma, Principal Secretary to PM, and I and a couple of others retired to my chamber in the Commerce Ministry, and we said, what shall we do? Then collectively we hit upon the idea that we will keep the resolution exactly as it is. Add a paragraph containing an impressive quotation from Jawaharlal Nehru, one by Indira Gandhi and one by Rajiv Gandhi, and have the same resolution and end by saying, this resolution marks continuity with change. The resolution was passed. Now Jairam Ramesh has recorded the story in his book. Therefore, behavior can change. Now I expected these rather incompetent managers to change their behavior in the face of a crisis. In the face of a crisis, a number of people do change their behavior. It's not as though behavior does not change. All of you know, in a crisis, you change your behavior. Unfortunately, they continue to live in denial. Now, this is my biggest complaint. You deny that the economy is demand constrained. You deny that the economy is investment starved. You don't mention anywhere that the economy has slided for 6 quarters. You don't mention anywhere that the core sector is growing at 0% April to November. You don't say any of those things. In a speech that lasts 160 minutes, should you not say, we did demonetization, there are upsides and downsides. We did GST, there are upsides and downsides. And today we are faced with a situation where the economic indicators are the following, and therefore we recognize that we have to take radical measures. Now, why don't you say that? There was a remarkable precedent. Just go back and read Dr. Manmohan Singh's 1991 speech. He set out the state of the economy and said, yes, we have problems. We have lived too long in a world that no longer exists. We have lived too long in denial. We have to shift gears. And then he went on to outline what he said and ended with this famous quotation from Victor Hugo. Now that is the kind of candor, that is the kind of transparency that you require in a crisis. Unfortunately, the managers that we have got are unwilling to accept that the economy is demand constrained, the economy is investment starved. 6 quarters have shown declining growth. Imports have declined, exports have declined, and all the economic indicators, or most of the economic indicators, are negative. Now, given that there is no evidence of behavioral change, we have to now look at the numbers there present. Is this the solution to our economy? Is this a solution to our problems? Now let's look at the numbers. In the current year, that is the year ending 31/3/2020, nominal GDP was assumed at 12%, but the numbers show nominal GDP will grow only by 8.5%. For the next year, they are assuming nominal GDP will grow only by 10%. So when you begin, you've already shaved off 2%. My nominal GDP will not grow by 12, it will grow only by 10. When the nominal GDP was assumed to grow at 12 and actually is growing at 8.5, you end up with real GDP growth of about 5. When nominal GDP will grow at only 10%, what will the actual be? I don't know. What will the real GDP be? On the 31st of January, the economic advisor says next year real GDP will grow between 6 and 6.5. The next day, the finance minister says the nominal GDP will grow only by 10. How can the two numbers coexist? We have looked at the data. Since 1970, the difference between nominal GDP and real GDP average is about 5%. Since 2000, the difference has been on average about 4%. The nominal GDP will grow only at about 10%, assumed. If it actually grows, say, at about 9 or 9.5, growth will not be more than 5.5. So you have to brace yourself for another year of low growth. Unless, of course, they revisit the budget and make some changes, which they did last year. They can do that this year also. They'll have to eat some humble pie if they revisit the budget, but if that is what you have to do, you have to do it. So we are faced with a situation where the growth this year will be very, very moderate growth. It can't be a revival of the economy. So which is why I said, I can't see a revival of the economy. And to talk about 6 to 6.5% is not only astonishing, it is even irresponsible. You can't make an irresponsible statement that the economy will grow between 6 and 6.5. There is no evidence the economy will grow by 6 and 6.5. They are also making many other assumptions. For example, when nominal GDP is growing by 10%, they are assuming that gross tax revenue will grow by 12%. Now that has never happened. If nominal GDP is growing only by 10%, gross tax revenue is not likely to grow by 12%. It usually mirrors the nominal GDP growth. The moment you shave off 2% from the gross tax revenue, you have to shave off an equal number from the net tax revenue. Then you have to shave off an equal number from the availability of funds, which will impact your expenditure. So those assumptions are also wrong. Look at some other assumptions. Corporation tax for the current year was assumed, I'm rounding off the numbers, at about 7,66,000 crore. They actually collected only 6,10,000 crore. Next year they hope to collect 6,81,000 crore. Income tax, they plan to collect 5,69,000 crore. They collected only 5,59,000 crore. Next year they plan to collect 6,38,000 crore. These numbers are all suspect. I'm not saying they're manufactured numbers. I'm saying they're suspect numbers. You've been extremely optimistic in making these assessments. Like in the current year and in the last year, you fell short of collection, you're likely to fall short of collections. If you fall short of collections, what is your plan B? I don't have a plan B here. You have a plan A. The assumptions behind plan A are questionable. The numbers are suspect. let me wish you well that you achieve plan A, but if you don't achieve plan A, where is your plan B? I don't find any indication of what plan B is. So the credibility of the numbers under serious question. Given that we have a very ill patient, I'm going back and recapitulating, very ill patient, not very competent managers, they are not likely or no indication that they will change their behavior, and their credibility with numbers is not very great. We still have to offer them solutions. We have offered solutions. The solutions are obvious solutions. The solution is take the 4 engines of growth and try to see how many engines can be fired again. Every engine is sputtering today. It's not possible to get all the 4 engines firing at full speed. But it's possible that 2 or 3 engines can be revived and energized. Now, what are the 4 engines of growth? This is something which all of you know. The 4 engines of growth are: number 1, government expenditure; number 2, private investment; number 3, private consumption; and number 4, exports. This is a uniform principle for all economies. These are the 4 engines of growth in any economy. Now, the 4, you can't do anything about private consumption immediately. That will be a consequence of what you do. But the other 3 engines are available to you. The one obvious engine, which is completely under the control of the government, is government expenditure. The other one is exports. And the third one, with a little nudge and a little push, is private investment. And I'm placing it in the order of feasibility. The one engine that is entirely under the government's control is government expenditure. According to me, even given the constraints of finances, government should have redrawn its expenditure pattern so that many of the programs that have long gestation, many of the programs that don't put money in the hands of the ordinary people are either deferred or slashed down. And you put the bulk of the money in programs that would reach money straight to the people. Let me give you a couple of examples. Now, I want to clean the rivers. You spend a lot of money. I support cleaning of rivers. But it's a long gestation period. In India, you can't clean a river because even as you clean the river is being polluted in some other place. The Ganga is the best example. Not all effluent discharges have been stopped. Yet the Ganga is being cleaned. You have to stop the effluent discharges completely as well as clean. Both are going on, and I wish them well. But these are long gestation period projects. They are not going to give you immediate results. I can give many examples like that. You want to open 100 Udan airports. Now look at the data. 50% of all Udan airports which have been opened in the last year are idle. There are no flights, there are no passengers. There's one flight to Salem. I don't know if it flies every day. There's one flight to Tuticorin. There was off and on one flight to Puducherry. In the northeast, half the airports do not have flights today because there are no aircraft and there are no passengers. Now why do you want to open 100 Udan airports now? You should open, but is this the year to open? And how does it put money immediately in the hands of people? Building an airport is a long project. It will take 3 years. It won't immediately bring benefit. On the contrary, two programs will have put money immediately in the hands of people. The one is Maganrega, the much reviled Maganrega is the one that is holding up rural India today. Remember, the Prime Minister said in Parliament, Maganrega is a monument to your mismanagement of the economy, which left millions of people in poverty. Now, Maganrega is the only safety net that is available for the poor people. And it reaches money directly to the poor people immediately. Now, what have they done about Maganrega? The Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Program, in the current year, they hope to spend 71,000 crore. In the next year, they budgeted only 61,500 crore. What the finance minister should have done is, I am putting 1 lakh crore in Maganrega. She should have put money in Maganrega and told all the states, listen, if there are any arrears of wages, clear them overnight, here is the money, and start the works immediately. Immediately people will get money. If I give many of you 1 lakh of rupees, you're not going to spend 1 lakh. So you're already spending to your satisfaction, or most of you are spending to your satisfaction. Out of the 1 lakh, you may spend another 20,000, but 80,000 will go into a savings instrument. You will not spend it, because we have all reached a level of satisfaction where our wants are met. But if I put 300 rupees in the hands of the very poor, they will spend it that day. They will spend it on food, they will spend it on medicine, they will spend it on buying a pair of slippers. They will spend it immediately. The second one is PM Kisan. The PM Kisan was not a very strong program, but it was a reasonably good program. They were giving 6,000 rupees to a farmer. For the current year, they budgeted 75,000 crore. They actually will spend only 54,000 crore. And next year, they are again budgeting 75,000. Now the answer was, I am raising PM Kisan from 6,000 to 12,000 rupees. That would have immediately energized the farmer. And make sure the money is available, so the money is given to him in that 2 or 3 installments, so that money goes to the farmer. Or expand the coverage. It today covers only the land owning farmer, extend it to the landless or the tenant farmer also. The tenant farmer also. It would have covered a much larger number. Of course, all this requires money, but you'll have to take the money from other long gestation projects and put it in these. These are the two surest programs which should have put money in the hands of people in a matter of 3 months. And then demand would have risen. There are a number of places where we find that the shadow of the expenditure secretary has loomed large. They are not spending the money allocated this year, and they are not allocating enough money next year. Take, for example, railways. The budgeted amount is 94,000 crore. End of the year, they will spend only 88,000 crore for railway. And next year they're providing only 83,000 crore as budgetary support. Food subsidy. The budgeted amount is 1,84,000 crore. They're going to spend only 1,08,000 crore. We have to find out what happened to the remaining 76,000 crore. And next year they're providing only 1,15,000 crore. Are they cutting back on food subsidies? I don't know. We will have to ask them. for answers in Parliament. Agriculture, for which the Finance Minister devoted nearly half an hour, agriculture and allied activities. The budgeted amount of the current year is 1,51,000 crore. They will end the year spending only 1,20,000 crore. So where is the remaining 30,000 crore? Where did it go? So obvious ways in which to increase government expenditure within the overall budget and stimulate demand were missed by the finance minister. She can still correct the numbers. Most finance ministers are too proud to admit that their numbers are wrong. They will not easily correct the numbers. But I'm afraid, if you want to stimulate demand, you have to correct the numbers, put more money into programs that will reach money immediately in the hands of the poor so that they will start buying goods and services. As I said, the second solution which economists have recommended is exports. Now, exports have many externalities. Exports means goods, we're talking about merchandise exports. Let's not talk about services, it's a little complicated. Goods which are produced in the country are pushed out of the country and somebody is paying for it. The more you do it, the good. I mean, it's no brainer. The more you do it is the good. Whatever you produce, try to push it out of the country. So that somebody in Finland, somebody in Japan, somebody in Tanzania will buy it and pay for it. So the more you export, the more it is good for this country. And the more you export, more jobs are created. Exports and construction are the two major, in terms of multiplication factor. For every rupee that you invest in exports, it creates more jobs. Now, as I said, exports have been negative for 6 months, 5 to 6 months now. Imports are also negative. And this government, unfortunately, has gone back to the pre-1991 days of protectionism. They believe that we must become self-sufficient. We must be self-reliant. We must make in India. Now, all these are very attractive slogans. I was also weaned on this diet of socialist slogans between 1970 and 1991. We also used to say this: self-reliance, self-sufficiency, made in India, buy India, make India. That's not the world economy functions. The world economy today is completely, there's a value chain, a worldwide global value chain. You have to find at what point of the value chain you can intervene and add value. What does Singapore do? Singapore knows at what point it should enter the value chain, and that's why it's a rich country. It enters the value chain in the financing. It enters the value chain in shipping, transshipping. That's all that Singapore has got. It's got a great harbour, a most efficient port. It's got great companies which provide finances. It raises capital all over the world. It provides capital at a low cost. Singapore doesn't manufacture anything. But yet, the value chain is incomplete without Singapore's participation, without Hong Kong's participation. So you must know when to enter the value chain. In fact, the economic advisor seems to have hit the right button. Incurring perhaps the wrath of the Prime Minister, he has modified the formula from made in India to assemble in India. Now, how long it will last, I don't know. But he's right. If you can't make in India, assemble in India. If you can't make the whole in India, make a part of it in India. Here is a gentleman who told me he's supplying auto parts to Germany, which is bloody good according to me. You're not going to make the Mercedes-Benz, but you can make the fender, the grill, the door, the handle. To that extent, it's good. So we must know when to enter the value chain. You can't talk about protectionism and old slogans, self-reliance, self-sufficiency. It's all very attractive. I'm not saying we should not become self-sufficient. We can become self-sufficient in freedom of speech. You constrain freedom of speech, but if you become self-sufficient in freedom of speech, they don't understand the world economy. They don't understand how the world economy functions. We also faced this difficulty in 1991. We had great difficulty in convincing our own party that listen, all right, all that was correct. Nobody is saying that we have said the wrong things in the past. But the time has come now to move on. The world is a very different place. Look what they have done. Since last December, they have increased import duties on a variety of items. They did it in December, they did it again earlier in the budget, then again did it in December, they've done it again. Over 100 items have increased the import duties. Now you think that if we increase the import duty, the other guy will keep quiet. What did you do? You put anti-dumping duty, safeguard duty, circumvention duty on solar panels of China. China simply moved its factory to Vietnam and set the solar panel. The other guy is not going to keep quiet either. If you impose import duties, he will impose import duties on your goods, and he will find ways to jump the tariff wall. So I think this approach is wrong. You have to push exports. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying, if somebody has got an exportable product which somebody is willing to buy, we should even subsidize it to some extent to push out the export, because it creates jobs in this country. And there are multiplier effects for the jobs that are created. Even if government has to subsidize some export, of course you run into the WTO wall, but we will see that later. That will come after 1 year. Push out the goods first. Get back the markets. See, in exports, please understand, once you lose a market, it's very difficult to capture the market. Because there's no backbone. If you don't sell shoes, somebody's going to come and sell shoes there. And then you go back and say, listen, I make better shoes, I'll sell it to you, so thank you very much, I've got another supplier. You cannot lose the export market. We have lost it already, which is why exports are negative. We have to get back to exports. I think she should have devoted much greater time to talk about exports and how she's going to push out merchandise exports. Remember, the number is frightening. We touched $315 billion on March 31, 2014. In the 5 years since, we have crossed that number in 1 year. In 4 years, we will cross that number, which means over a 5-year period, exports have been flat. There is no export growth at all. The third, of course, is private investment. Now, this is a more difficult task. How do you tell Indian investors and foreign investors, come and invest in India? You have to first do it with Indian investors. If Indian investors are not investing, foreign investors are not likely to invest. Now, what will promote investment? Investments can be promoted by tax incentives, obviously, tax holidays. Investment can also be promoted by trust. Today, there is a complete breakdown of trust between the investor and the government. Complete breakdown of trust. You have armed every agency with extraordinary powers. Powers of search, seizure, attachment, taking possession, selling the property, arrest. This is not the way a country can do business. There will be some black sheep among business people. But you can't look upon every business person with suspicion. You have to have trust. Today the government seems to trust its officers more than business persons. Officers feel empowered, emboldened. And in the last 2 years, they have crossed all limits of arbitrariness. Wherever I go, I get stories about how they are being harassed. Small, medium, large. There is no business house in this country which does not have multiple litigations against either the income tax or the customs or the excise or the ED or the CBI. Now today the finance minister says, I'm going to give a charter of rights for the taxpayer. But you first take back the charter of rights you gave to the officer first. You've given him such a blank, a carte blanche charter to do whatever he likes. Do you know today that investigating agencies can attach your property, take possession and sell it even before the main case is over? That is the kind of power they have given. So first take away that charter you gave last 2 years before you talk about this charter. If that charter is taken away, this charter is not necessary really. Now, investment is an act of faith. Dr. Manmohan Singh used to say that. Investment is an act of faith. Why would somebody risk his money and risk borrowing money to invest in order to create wealth? That's an act of faith. He believes that he can overcome those risks and still produce wealth. You must respect him, encourage him to invest. Now, I think this budget speech is extremely short on how to improve government expenditure and direct it to areas where the benefit will be visible immediately. It is short on how to promote exports. It is short on how to promote private investment. Now, I have criticized the finance minister's marksmanship, but I'm willing to criticize my own marksmanship. Before the budget, the week before the budget, I suggested 10 things that she could do from what I picked up in conversations with a number of people in Mumbai and Delhi. I said these are the 10 things she can do. If she had done all those 10 things, I would have still complimented it. But I find that 8 of the 10 things she didn't do. Which is why there is such gloom all over. I don't know what the market reacted today. Went down again or picked up? 50 points. That's about flat. Now I said, what I gather, she will do something about the long-term capital gains. She did not. I said she will announce a direct taxes code. She did not. I said she will reduce some GST rates. She did not. I said she will increase the amount in PM Kisan and expand the coverage. She did not. I said she will put more money in Manrega. She did not. I said she will give a much larger outlay for defense. In fact, the defense outlay is the lowest in India's history this year, 1.2% of GDP. 1.2% of GDP is the lowest defense outlay. And I provoked the Chief of Defence Staff to protest loudly. I said, you become the Chief of Defence Staff and the Secretary of the Department of Military Affairs, you've been given so little money, protest. And we'll join your protest. And I thought she will announce 1 or 2 development financial institutions. She is not. These are obvious things that she could have done. She would have been criticized by some quarters for doing this. She would have been welcomed in some quarters for doing this. But these are obvious things that could have been done. And she did not. So where does that leave us? The last point that I wish to make is, in the entire process, states have been cheated. I don't know why chief ministers have not yet spoken up. The transfers to state governments this year, in 2018-19, the transfer was 7,61,000 crore. In 2019-20, the transfer will be only 6,56,000 crore. And next year, they are estimating 7,84,000 crore. So states have lost a considerable amount of money. Now, each state loses 2,000, 3,000 crore. It might look a small number from the government of India's point of view. From the government of the state's point of view, 3,000 crore is a huge amount. So states have also lost money. So where does this take us in terms of conclusion? The conclusion is the patient is still ill. The manager has not shown any evidence of greater competence, nor has the manager shown that she will change her behavior, they will change their behavior. They have missed some obvious solutions to the problems. They are still living in denial, and therefore, like 2019-20 was a wasted year, I have the fear that 2020-21 may also be a wasted year. At least the first 6 months are wasted. Because if you had done something now, it would have taken effect about 6 months later. Not having done anything, the first 6 months are certainly wasted. But I do hope that after the debate in Parliament, they will make some changes, they will make some adjustments. And they will take some of our advice, which is well-meaning advice. We are in opposition. But not all opposition advice is ill-meaning. It can be well-meaning also. And I sincerely hope that they will do something that can revive the economy. I think it's possible. If you do a few things that are being recommended, it's possible that we can go back to at least 6% plus growth. And then thereafter we go to 7% growth. None of the things that the pie in the sky that they paint is likely to happen. Farmers' income will not double by 2022. India will not become a $5 trillion economy by 2024. By the way, while the Prime Minister said 2024, the Chief Economic Advisor has quietly shifted the goalpost to 2025 in the introduction. That's rather clever. Quietly shifted to 2025. It's not likely to happen. And anyway, we are not concerned with this pie in the sky statements. We are concerned with the hard life of getting the economy going. It is now very moribund, and you can get it going by doing a few obvious things. And I sincerely hope that chambers must speak up now. I mean, I'm sure you have internal discussions. You must speak up. My real worry is you're not speaking enough. What is this fear? I can't understand what this fear is. If academics can speak, if writers can speak, if students can speak, if women can speak today, homemakers can speak, why are the chambers not willing to speak? What is it that they can do to you? But let's test their limits of harassment. Speak up. And if chambers speak up, and certainly the national chambers, FICCI, CII, ASSOCHAM speak up, the government is bound to listen to you and take corrective steps. Thank you very much for having me here. Hope that what I've said today, what I've said today will help you formulate your own views on the budget and present the correct views. Who? Oh, Thalaimurai. Okay. Now, Thalainomics is very nuanced English. Now, what have all of you believed when you read Thalainomics? That a thali has become cheaper, correct? How many of you believe that thali has become cheaper? After you read that chapter or read about the chapter, how many of you genuinely thought, oh, maybe the thali has become cheaper? How many of you thought that? No. The thali is the same. 9 out of 10 thought the thali has become cheaper. That is not what the CA said. You read it carefully, the CA said the thali has become more affordable. That's very different from cheaper. What he's really saying is the numerator, the price of the thali, may have gone up, but the denominator, your disposable income for that segment is also gone up. Therefore, the thali has become more affordable. Now, which is the segment that he took for making this fantastic calculation? He took regular employment in the organized sector. Now, regular employment in the organized sector is not a proper sample. The proper sample is the daily worker. The proper sample is the agricultural worker. The proper sample is the daily coolie. If you take, say for example, all the income tax payers as your sample, the thali will be even more affordable. So you choose a wrong sample and you use very clever English. You say more affordable and give the impression to the whole world that the thali has become cheaper. But the thali has not become cheaper, and there's no reason why the thali should become cheaper. According to me, thali price must be correct so that the producer gets the price. When onions were selling at 145 rupees a kilo, the producer of onions in Maharashtra was getting 14 rupees a kilo. How is that fair? How is that equitable? As consumers, and all of us are consumers here, we think that prices must come down. Of course, prices must be fair. But whatever fair price the consumer pays, a fair share must go to the producer. The producer's prices are abysmally low in this country. Which is why when a doctor wants his son to become a doctor, a lawyer wants his daughter to become a lawyer, an MP or a politician wants a son or daughter to become a politician, a chartered accountant wants his or son or daughter to become a chartered accountant. I have not come across a farmer who wants a son to become a farmer. The producer prices are so low in this country. Anyway, that's a different story for another occasion. Thank you very much once again.